If you had asked me just a few years ago what I felt about the idea of empowering women and girls, I would have told you I was 100% all in, no questions asked. Empowered women empower women, right? Girl power. I had seen and experienced these themes in practice, and I was all for them. But it was an incident at my daughter's school that caused me to question what I really knew about lifting up women and girls. It caused me to question the relationship between empowerment and injustice. When my daughter was in second grade, she came home with an assignment to dress up and emulate as a historical figure for a wax museum us parents would be invited to visit. The assignment came home with this list of historical figures to choose from. As you can see, my daughter circled the name she was angling for. And as any parent might do, I tried to figure out why she circled these names in particular. It took me a minute at the time, and you probably already see it, but I eventually realized my daughter circled who she thought to be the women on the list. I then quickly realized that on this list of 10 names to choose from, only 2 choices were women. I thought surely this was short-sighted and a simple fix. So I reached out to the school principal, politely, to ask if we could add a few more female historical figures for the kids to choose from. She told me that while she and the teachers saw the same imbalance, and shared my frustration, that this list was extracted directly from the history and social studies curriculum in the state of Virginia where I live. Ultimately, she told me that the list attached to this assignment wasn't up for change or debate because it was the list that was in the curriculum. My daughter went on to play a cute and well-researched Helen Keller, as did probably 50% of the girls in her class. I went on to wonder, if this is what the list looks like in second grade, what do the rest of the grades look like? There was only one way to find out, and that was by reviewing the entire K-12 history curriculum. I recruited a partner, and together we read that curriculum, and we counted every reference of a proper name of a man or woman. By the time we were done, we found male historical figures were cited 1,008 times, while female historical figures were cited just 105 times. Yes, in this 21st century classroom, women still accounted for just 1 out of every 10 names referenced in the entire K-12 history and social studies curriculum. So how did this change my relationship with the concept of empowerment? Merriam-Webster defines empowerment as being granted power, rights, or authority to do something. So by that definition, when applied to empowering women and girls, we're saying only once they've been given power, rights, and authority is the world theirs for the taking. This is why I believe empowering women is failing women. Empowerment puts the onus on women and girls to graciously accept the power and rights being granted to them to better their position in the world, all the while potentially distracting us from the injustice that took away their power in the first place. This incident at my daughter's school showed me that while I could empower her to see beyond the limited worldview prescribed in that curriculum, that would do nothing to address the fact that what she needed to be met with was a better curriculum, and to be met by teachers and administrators who weren't willing to accept the status quo. This incident, as simple as it may seem, was a significant wake-up call for me. It's what I call one of life's speed bumps. It jolted me out of cruising speed. It forced me to slow down and take greater notice of my surroundings. It caused me to wonder what else I was missing. So I set out on a learning journey. I learned a lot, but notably I learned women and girls have power and authority in some important ways. Women have power in numbers. We make up slightly more than half of the population on this planet. Women have power in the economy. In the US, they direct 83% of all buying power and influence. Women have power in knowledge, making up 2/3 of people enrolled in post-secondary education and graduating 4 years of higher education at nearly twice the rate men do. The more I learned, the more I came to challenge my long-held belief that empowerment was the way to a better future for women and girls. Instead, I came to believe that true transformation is possible when women are prioritized, when the barriers they face are demolished by those who hold the power to do so, instead of giving women power and authority to attempt to overcome them. It was a particular story on my learning journey that shifted me towards this idea that prioritization is where true transformation takes place. When I share this story, I like to start with a quiz. So, if I were to ask you, as of March 2022, which of these countries is #1 in the world for the number of women represented in their legislative bodies? Think Congress and Parliament. How many of you, by a show of hands, would choose Iceland? How many of you would choose New Zealand? That's a good guess. How many of you would choose Rwanda? For those of you who choose Rwanda, you get today's gold star. As of March 2022, women hold approximately 55% of seats in Rwanda's national legislatures. Cuba comes in a close second with 53%, followed later by Iceland and New Zealand, and much later by the US, with just 27% of our seats held by women. In 2008, Rwanda was the first country in the world to elect a majority female parliament, and they have held the top spot ever since. Now, you may be saying, Maureen, that's not a story of prioritization. That's a story of process of elimination. And to a point, that is true. Women and girls experienced a horrific genocide in 1994. The whole country did. In the span of just 100 days, the genocide left more than 800,000 people dead and another 2 million fleeing for their lives. When the violence eventually ended, records estimated that of Rwanda's remaining population of roughly 6 million, anywhere from 60 to 80% of those people remaining were women. So, for the country to rebuild, it would have to do so with the predominantly female population that remained. So, how did they do that? Rwanda, in 2003, just 9 years after the genocide, passed a new constitution. With the help of women leaders, this new constitution enshrined equality between women and men, most notably establishing a quota requiring a minimum 30% of parliamentary seats be held for women. Rwanda's president embraced and promoted the important role women had played in rebuilding their country. And he made clear how critical it was women continue to be included in important ways. He struck the vision, the country embraced it, using the power of their votes to go beyond the 30% minimum required, instead electing women to 64% of parliamentary seats. Or as I like to see it, the country prioritized women. The full story of Rwandan women is not mine to tell. I wasn't there, and I am not an expert in Rwandan history. So my somewhat rosy interpretation is likely short-sighted. But what is my story to tell is the impact reading about Rwandan women had on me. Reading about Rwandan women and the history and transformation filled me with hope. To see a country so dramatically transformed in a relatively short amount of time showed me that rapid progress is possible when women are prioritized. When the people who hold the power to take down the barriers they face do it, they demolish them, instead of giving women power and authority to attempt to overcome them. And as it turns out, prioritizing women isn't just a win for other women. In the last 2 decades, the World Bank has found that Rwanda has experienced significant improvements in living standards, including strong economic growth, increased life expectancy, and decreased rates of poverty. This theory of prioritization plays out in other countries as well. In 2019, researchers in Canada set out to understand the relationship between women in leadership and public health. They found that as the number of women in leadership increased, the country's mortality rates decreased. A 2012 study out of UC Berkeley found that companies with more women on their boards were more likely to invest in renewable power, more likely to implement carbon reduction programs, and more likely to reduce the environmental effects of production and packaging. More and more data and studies show that where women are prioritized, they don't just make life better for other women, they make life better for everyone. Clearly, I have developed a passion for prioritizing women as a strategy to a better world. But back to this tricky topic of empowerment. There is a place for empowerment in the hard work of the world. But I have come to understand that empowerment is the work that comes after injustice. As long as there are injustices robbing women and girls of power and authority, we need empowerment efforts to restore and overcome. But I believe that prioritization is a strategy to prevent injustice from happening in the first place. So you may be wondering, what does prioritization look like in practice? Well, it looks like the 28 countries around the world who recognized giving women power and authority to run for office isn't enough. They have opted to prioritize women by passing legislation requiring a quota anywhere from 30%, like in Rwanda, to 50% in Mexico, be reserved for women. It looked like the state of California recognizing that empowering women to seek seats on corporate boards puts the onus on women to bust through the barriers. They have opted to prioritize women by passing legislation requiring corporations to reserve a minimum number of seats. Now, both of those examples happened at legislative levels. But there are 3 simple ways you and I as individuals can support and enable the transformative power of prioritization. First, get curious when you encounter empowerment efforts. Evolve, as I have, beyond immediate unflinching support to instead pausing and searching for the root issue that took away power in the first place. When you find that root issue, you find the opportunity for prioritization. Second, be willing to challenge what you believe to be true. A world where women and girls are prioritized is not one many of us ever have lived in. But opportunities are abound to leverage the transformative power of prioritization in each of our spheres of influence and in so many challenges the world faces today: closing wage and wealth gaps, improving women's health, and preventing domestic and sexual violence. In fact, once you're willing to shift your thinking, it's hard not to see the opportunities we each have in our world. And third comes with a word of caution. When you begin to more thoroughly examine the status of women and girls in the world, it's very easy to lose hope. There is no shortage of stories in the world today where women aren't being prioritized or empowered. And so third, refuse. Refuse to let those stories rob you of the opportunity to be inspired. Inspired by the places in the world giving us brilliant examples of what we all stand to gain when we leverage the transformative power of prioritization. It's those places and stories that keep me connected to hope and inspire me to break down barriers where I can, from the halls of Congress to the halls of my daughter's elementary school. Thank you.